Are you a pet parent looking for the ultimate pet pampering experience? At Party Paws Playhouse, they understand that your furry friends deserve the best. That's why they offer top-notch grooming service and a luxurious pet hotel experience like no other. Whether your four-legged family member needs a spa day with the expert groomers or a cozy staycation while you're away, Party Paws Playhouse has got you covered. Are you ready to make an appointment or a reservation? Give them a call today at 708-898-2358. The friendly staff is always there to assist you and to ensure your pet's comfort and happiness.
Don't let a DUI charge ruin your life. Get a professional and confidential evaluation from our experienced team at True Heights Treatment. Our evaluations are accepted by the majority of courts in the state of Illinois and provide a comprehensive assessment of your substance use patterns and potential treatment needs. Get the help you need today and start your path to a brighter future. Contact us now to schedule your evaluation at 708-248-7039 or at thtdui.com.
The George Brassey Podcast is made possible with funding provided from Brassey Global Strategies, LLC, a leading political consulting, public policy, government affairs, and research firm. Are you interested in running for elected office? Need advice? Call or email George, 708-769-5015. Brassey Global Strategies 1 at gmail.com.
The George Brassey Podcast is brought to you by Enzo's and Caramel Corn, located at 1710 Chicago Road in Chicago Heights, Illinois. Enzo's and Caramel Corn is the go-to spot for authentic Italian beef, pizza, and the most irresistible caramel corn you'll ever taste. Whether you're in the mood to dine in and savor the cozy atmosphere, grab a quick carry-out order, or have your favorites delivered right to your door, Enzo's and Caramel Corn has got you covered. 7 days a week and open late. Call Enzo's and Caramel Corn today at 708-754-7040 or visit them at enzosbeef.com. Hello, everybody. This is George. I know it's been a while since I dropped a podcast episode, but I'm so glad to welcome my friend and guest, Kevin Barron, who is behind the excellent blog and website, South Cook Explorer, to the podcast. Kevin, thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Kevin, can you tell the audience a little bit about you and how this idea of the South Cook Explorer page came to be?
Sure. I definitely noticed during COVID, during lockdowns, that there were quite a few properties that were changing hands and buildings that were being demolished across the south suburbs. That some of them were pretty iconic and things that I remember driving past, with my parents in the car when I was younger, and it felt like the character of a lot of suburbs was changing pretty quickly. So I started doing some photography work where I was documenting some of these older houses or some of these older businesses and towns, just to be able to share them and talk about what their unique history was. It became something I started posting on Instagram that really took off, and it certainly wasn't expecting the turnout or the response that it's gotten in the last 2 years that I've been doing so. And I, in the last year, have started making custom Google Maps so that I can share where some of these landmarks in different communities are, because it seems like different historical societies are they share their content differently, and in some places it's easy to find online, in some places it's not so easy. So I try to do my best to make that a uniform presentation on where you can find information about any south suburb.
Kevin, what are some of the suburbs that you noticed a lot of changes in at this point when you first got started?
Well, it certainly started with growing up in Bremen and Orland Township area and seeing one that really sticks with me is a St. Roch's Friary that was on 159th next to the Oak Forest Hospital. Watching that come down was disappointing, because I remember seeing that since I almost been 4 or 5 years old driving to my grandparents' house down 159th. And that's been there for years. I mean, that was there, I think, when the hospital was built.
And Kevin, for context, tell the listeners what that was.
That was that was the end result, I believe, of the county not allowing religious buildings on their property for the Oak Forest Hospital. So they built a home for the priests directly across the street from the church or from the hospital. Mm-hmm. And those priests, I think, went on to help establish St. Christopher's, the Midlothian. And I think they predated a lot of the churches in the early 20th century in the suburbs.
And it was hard to see it go.
It was disappointing. It was such a unique building, and the more I started doing this, the more I realized that there's unique buildings and characteristics of every suburb, and should be our job to keep those around and preserve those so that the character of each town remains.
Now, I know you've done a little exploring in the city of Chicago Heights, where I'm in Alderman. Can you talk about some things you've seen there and what you find interesting?
Yeah, and another thing, I think, being a teacher in Chicago Heights area too, that really caught me was seeing St. James go. That was such an iconic building at the corners of Chicago Road and Lincoln Highway that that was a tough one to lose. And
sure,
I didn't want to see more buildings like that disappear without being able to share them. So some really cool houses in the Euclid district. There's a bunch of really like older houses that have storefronts attached that you don't see too often anymore along Chicago Road. And some of the things that it led me into were, what other landmarks exist in Chicago Heights. And I think that I found more signs or houses that have landmark signs than their website even listed. So that was another motivation for me to want to do what I can to make sure that information was current and available for everyone.
Kevin, what goes into making these maps?
It's different, I think, depending on which town that I'm looking at. It started off as me just being able to make a map that I could route out where different landmarks are that I can visit quickly during lunch breaks. And it's turned into maybe documenting the official landmarks for certain towns. Like I know Orland or Tinley Park's map that I made for them was based off of, I think, their 10 or 15 official landmarks. But then, like where I live in Lamont, we don't have necessarily like a designated landmark system. We have a historic district. So being able to label as many buildings as I can find information for online within that district, or things right on the edge of the town that are older and iconic and people recognize from living here for years. It's a little different for each one that I've done, but it's kind of the same idea regardless. I know the one I made for Harvey was before the newly rebooted Harvey Historical Society formed. So I had drawn out what I expected like a historic district for their downtown would be, and label some of the buildings of old stores and locations that are still standing along 154th Street. Some of them might just be national landmarks that exist in the town, and some of them might be smaller places that used to be a hotel 100 years ago, and now it's a residential house. So it's different depending on each town, but unique to each town, I guess, because they all have something different to offer.
When you think about what do the South suburbs as a whole have to offer historically into the state of Illinois, what do you think it is?
Good question. What do we have to offer individually or uniquely here? We have a lot of really well-preserved historic downtown districts. And I think that's because of having the abundance of train lines that we have in the Chicagoland region. A lot of these towns were either established because of a train passing through, or really grew because of the train being available. But the way that you see a downtown historic district around Lockport looks different than how you would see the train station area that's the downtown Homewood area, or that would be different than what we see in Monique. And I think that you see a really interesting collection of architecture, a lot of interesting brickwork or limestone work in our region, which I think is very unique. There's Chicagoland as a whole, I think, was a major. It's always been a major place to live, but even 100 years ago, I think that was really living up to that second city name. So you had You had notable people in just about every community doing something unique. I'm not sure there's one specific example I can think of, but um, I'm glad that I'm thankful that we have been able to do the preservation work that we have in different communities and keep those downtown areas around.
Kevin, can you talk a little bit about the role golf played in the development of the south suburbs?
Sure. Golf and trains, I think, are the two big ones right there. Um, there's tons of lines along the Illinois Central. We see that all the way from where Harvey had one, or Dixie High, on Dixie Highway at the mall location that was previously a golf course before you enter into 5 or 6 different golf courses from Homewood to Olympia Fields. That was a major drive to get people out of the city and visiting nature. Golf was a huge factor in the development of a lot of our suburbs. Looking at older maps that I've researched, seeing places that were golf courses before they became developments. Like one that comes to mind immediately, Dixmoor used to exist in between the Calumet Country Club and Ravislow. There was a third golf course in between those two. It was a huge draw, and eventually that's what led to people living, I think, in the suburbs, was having these retreat homes that they would visit on the weekends, and it became, well, just commute back to Chicago and stay here all the time. We have a very unique landscape from the glacial Lake Chicago era, 10,000 years ago, that left us with a unique landscape that's benefited both trains and golf. And we can see that another example of that in the south suburbs, where the CN yards are in Homewood and Harvey. That was the world's first double hump yard, which a rail hump yard was using gravity to push the train cars over so they could separate them quicker. And the CN yard, or the previous Markham yard, was the first double hump yard, or the first two-hill railroad yard in the world. And they certainly benefited from having that business within those communities right over there. And that was because of the landscape that we have that's unique out this way.
You talked about the glacial aspects and Lake Chicago. Wasn't Blue Island at one point an actual island?
Yeah, that's connected. The Blue Island Ridge is connected to Beverly, and that's the highest point of elevation in Chicago. It's just the one spot that the glaciers did not hit. So that led to a couple of different islands forming between Stony Island and Blue Island, as you mentioned, or Mount Forest Island from Hickory Hills to Lamont was a major prehistoric island from that lake. And that's kind of our cutoff too, and where we stop seeing clay deposits and start seeing more limestone, because of how that water was previously held from those glaciers.
The current mayor of Blue Island, Fred Bellato, has been a former guest on this podcast. Can you talk a little bit about some of the historical areas within Blue Island? I think they, as a community, have done a great job preserving some of their past.
Oh, absolutely. Old Western is phenomenal. It looks beautiful. I just saw the north side had a couple buildings that were recently updated, and they look sharp. And the south side of Old Western is such a preserved little walkable neighborhood over there. I love being able to go to events at Blue Island Beer Co. or Rock Island Public House. They've made that area great. But going farther north from there, in Greenwood Avenue, I believe, some incredible homes over there. There's very unique architecture, and they show it off for sure on that street.
Kevin, can you talk about the I&M Canal and its role in the history of Illinois?
Yeah, absolutely. That was predating any railroads that were in Chicago. That was very, very early on to the northeastern Illinois development. But the 96-mile canal that was built from Bridgeport to LaSalle near Starved Rock was the first transportation method without having to carry things by foot. Getting grains and produce from the heartland out to Chicago or out to the East Coast, and tons of building materials as well, because we can see all the limestone that happened. It was dug from Joliet to Lamont, featured prominently in a bunch of Chicago buildings. So that waterway was the original connection to Chicago and helped make sure that we had the materials necessary to build up the city. At last, I think it was opened in 1848, and about 1900 when the sanitary and ship canal opened, that they stopped using that, at least to the Chicago end. But yeah, that revolutionized the entire region. That was the original path to get through any of the Midwest.
Kevin, on your website, there's a list of museums in Cook and Will County. Can you talk a little bit about which museums really stand out to you? Because I know you've visited most of them.
I've certainly made it a point this summer to enjoy my summer break and get to visit some more that I haven't been to previously. Thornton is incredible. Great people that work there. I just got to do the Thornton Quarry tour last month with them, and that was such an incredible trip. I was recently at the first open house that Flossmoor had organized. They recently started their historic society, a preservation for Flossmoor. I'm not sure what the full name is, but that was a great experience. I was blown away seeing the amount of archives that they have on blueprints of historic homes and buildings like the Civic Center. They have a great collection in there that I'm excited to see shown off. And of course, I got to throw in Lamont. I love being in my historical society and working there. They've been in existence now, I think, for 50 years. So they have a massive collection of artifacts, whether it's photos that they've collected for years or just things that they've collected from businesses that have gone out of business or things that were notable in town. Their museum and their archives are dense. They have a lot.
Kevin, the last question we always ask our guests is, what are 2 books that you would recommend to the audience that have been important to you as a person, and why?
One of them is from an author. I've been trying to reach out to this guy too. He's great. Tom Wilcoxon. He does graphic novels, and they're always historically factual, which I love. But he did a book on the I&M Canal that I thought was fantastic, and the way that he illustrated that to show how these communities might have looked 175, 150 years ago is incredible. I find myself referencing that book a lot. I was trying to think of what other nonfiction books that I could provide for you on that one. I think I'm going to have to go with Neuromancer from William Gibson being a favorite sci-fi novel. That one's stuck with me since high school.
What's that book about?
That was a guy that had first coined the term cyberspace. That was kind of cyberpunk street sci-fi that was not really happening in the early 80s when he was writing like that. It was a sort of noir feeling kind of novel that I don't know. I like that one. It just the cool story that stuck with me with how people viewed technology, I think, in the early 80s and what that would have looked like going forward.
Kevin Barron, where can the audience find you if they want to link up with you on the internet?
My website is southcookexplore.com. That's where I have all my maps and other resources available. I'm most commonly posting on Instagram. The username there is also southcookexplore. That's probably the 2 best places to see the content that I do and what kind of information I have available to share.
Kevin, thanks for coming on the podcast, and thanks for doing the important work of preserving the history of our communities.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. Take care.
Thanks.
Begin to transform your life and work towards inner peace with expert psychotherapy. At True Heights Treatment, our experienced therapists provide personalized, compassionate care to help you overcome life's challenges and reach your goals. Whether you're struggling with depression, anxiety, relationship issues, or other mental health concerns, our team is here to support you. With a warm and welcoming in-person and virtual office atmosphere and a commitment to person-centered and evidence-based treatments, we are dedicated to helping you address your life's challenges. Contact us now to schedule your first session at 708-248-7039 or online at trueheightstx.com. Book your appointment today and start your journey towards a happier, healthier life.
Need more George? Like his pages on Facebook. Friends of George Brassey PAC, Fifth Ward Business Alliance, Chicago Heights Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, and the George Brassey Podcast. Need more George? Like his pages on Facebook. Friends of George Brassey PAC, Fifth Ward Business Alliance, Chicago Heights Bicycle and Pedestrian Resource Center, and the George Brassey Podcast.